Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I grew up as the quiet kid who sat in the middle of the classroom, trying not to draw attention to myself. School was hard for me in ways that other kids didn't seem to struggle with. While everyone else would finish their worksheets in 10 minutes, I'd still be on the third problem, reading the same sentence over and over, trying to make sense of it. Back in elementary school, they tested me for special education. My parents had to sit through meetings with teachers and specialists who used big words I didn't understand but could tell weren't good. They talked about processing delays and learning differences. I remember my mom holding my hand really tight during one of those meetings. Eventually, they decided I didn't need special ed, but something was clearly different about how my brain worked. It wasn't until years later that I finally got diagnosed with ADHD, but by then, the damage was already done. I spent my entire childhood thinking I was just stupid. Math was the hardest subject for me. Numbers never made sense to me the way they did for other kids. I could read the textbook 5 times and still not understand what it was asking me to do. By the time I got to 8th grade, I'd learned to just keep my head down and struggle through it quietly. Asking questions felt dangerous because it meant admitting I didn't get something that everyone else seemed to understand perfectly. My math teacher that year was someone I'll call Mr. H. He was one of those teachers who seemed to forget that his students were actual people. He'd roll his eyes when someone asked a question and make snide comments under his breath that were just loud enough for everyone to hear. The smart kids loved him because he'd joke around with them and make them feel special. The rest of us just tried to stay invisible. I'd already failed 2 quizzes in his class that month. My parents were getting worried about my grades and had scheduled a parent-teacher conference for the following week. I was terrified of what Mr. H would tell them. One day, we were learning about algebraic equations. I'd read the chapter twice the night before and taken notes, but when he started explaining it in class, I got completely lost. I raised my hand because I figured if I didn't ask now, I'd fail the upcoming test. My hand shook a little when I waited for him to call on me. Mr. H looked at me and sighed like I'd already inconvenienced him. I told him I didn't understand how he got from one step to another and asked if he could explain it again. It was such a simple question. The kind of question students ask 100 times a day in every classroom across the country. I wasn't being rude or difficult. I genuinely just wanted to understand. He stared at me for a second and then his face twisted into this expression I'll never forget. Half smirk, half disgust. Then he asked if I was an R word. The classroom went completely silent. I felt my face get hot and my stomach dropped like I'd just fallen off a cliff. Did he actually just say that? Out loud, in front of everyone? A few kids gasped. Someone in the back let out a nervous laugh, but most people just sat there in shocked silence waiting to see what would happen next. All those years of feeling stupid came rushing back at once. All those meetings and tests and specialists, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. All the times I'd struggled with homework while my friends finished theirs in minutes. All the times I felt like something was broken in my brain that worked fine in everyone else's. I thought about all the kids in the special education program at our school. They were good people who just learned differently. They didn't deserve to have their struggles used as an insult. But this time, instead of feeling ashamed, I felt angry. Furious, actually. Not just for me, but for every kid who'd actually been in special ed. For every student who learned differently and had to deal with people like him, making them feel less than human. I looked him straight in the eyes and didn't break eye contact. I told him, yeah, I licked windows and ate crayons. His smug expression completely vanished. He blinked a few times like he couldn't process what I just said. His voice cracked a little when he asked if I really licked windows. He was trying to backtrack, trying to make it seem like he'd been joking the whole time. But it was too late for that. I confirmed it again saying yep because clearly he thought I was an R word. I said it completely deadpan. No smile, no indication that I was kidding. Just stared at him with the blankest expression I could manage. I wanted him to sit with what he'd said. I wanted him to feel as uncomfortable as he just made me feel. The class erupted. Kids were trying so hard not to laugh that some of them were actually shaking in their seats. A girl in the front row had her hand clamped over her mouth. The guy next to me was coughing to cover up his laughter. Even some of the smart kids who usually kissed up to him were grinning. Mr. H's face turned bright red. He opened his mouth a few times like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out what. Finally, he just turned back to the board and continued with the lesson like nothing had happened. But his hands were shaking when he wrote on the board, and his voice wasn't as confident as it had been before. He kept stumbling over his words and had to restart his explanation twice. For the rest of class, I just glared at him. Every time he looked in my direction, I made sure he saw me staring. I didn't take notes. I didn't look at my textbook. I just watched him squirm. When the bell rang, everyone filed out of the classroom. A few kids gave me nods of approval as they passed my desk. When a girl who was in the special education program for dyslexia stopped by my desk and whispered a quiet thank you, that made everything worth it. After that day, everything changed. Whenever I raised my hand, he actually answered my questions properly. No more eye rolls or sighs or condescending comments. He'd explain things clearly and even ask if I understood or needed him to go over it again, with me and with everyone else too. It was like that one moment had reminded him that his students were real people who deserved basic respect. The parent-teacher conference the following week was awkward. Mr. H sat there and told my parents I was a good student who just needed to ask more questions. He didn't mention the incident at all. My mom looked confused because she'd been expecting bad news based on my quiz grades. I kept quiet and just nodded along. My grades in his class actually improved after that. Not because the material got easier, but because I wasn't afraid to ask questions anymore. And when I did ask, he actually helped me instead of making me feel like an idiot. I ended up passing his class with a B-. Word spread around school about what happened. A few other teachers heard about it through the student grapevine. Mr. H started being nicer to all his students, not just me. It was like the whole thing had been a wake-up call for him. I'm not proud of what I said. Using that word, even to make a point, wasn't okay. But I was 13 and angry and wanted him to understand how hurtful his words were. I started getting migraines when I was 13. Not the kind where you take some medicine and move on with your day. The kind that makes you want to hide in a dark room for hours. Light feels like knives in your eyes, and every sound pounds in your head. My mom has always been into natural remedies. When the headache started, she immediately began researching. But her version of research means reading random blogs and asking an AI chatbot for medical advice. She's completely obsessed with it. At first, it wasn't so bad. She'd make me herbal tea or tell me to drink more water, normal stuff. But over the past year, things have gotten out of control. My bathroom counter looks like a vitamin store exploded, bottles everywhere. Magnesium, vitamin B2, coenzyme Q10, feverfew, butterbur. Some I can't even pronounce. She makes me take them every single day, morning and night. If I forget or say I don't need them, she gives me this look like I've personally betrayed her, like I'm throwing away all her hard work and love, so usually I just take them without fighting about it. But here's the thing, I'm 16, not 6. I can read and research on my own. When I started looking into what she was giving me, I realized some of it was way too much. The magnesium especially. She had me taking almost 700 milligrams a day. Every article I found said that was excessive. The recommended amount for someone my age was around 350 to 400 milligrams daily. Too much can cause stomach problems and other issues. I tried telling her about this 2 months ago. I showed her the medical websites I'd found. She barely looked at them. She said those sites didn't know my specific situation. I pushed back and said they were actual medical resources, not just random stuff online. She insisted she'd done her research and knew what she was doing. I asked her to at least look at what I found. She shut me down completely. She said she wasn't taking medical advice from a teenager. That hurt. I wasn't trying to undermine her. I just wanted her to consider that maybe she was overdoing it. After that, she started sending me these long walls of text from her AI chatbot. She'd ask it questions about migraines and supplements, and it would give these responses that she treated like they came from an actual doctor. The thing that really got me was when she sent one that told me I should be taking 850 milligrams of magnesium. 850! I couldn't believe what I was reading. I told her it couldn't be right, that it was way more than anything I'd seen recommended. She insisted it knew what it was talking about because it had access to all kinds of medical information. I pointed out that it wasn't a doctor, just a computer program. She snapped back that I didn't know everything just because I could use the internet. After that conversation, I mostly gave up trying to convince her. I kept taking what she gave me because fighting about it every day was exhausting. But the migraines kept getting worse. That's why we ended up at the neurologist yesterday. I've seen this doctor a few times before. She's nice, actually listens, doesn't talk down to me just because I'm young. My mom came with me like she always does. She likes to be involved in my medical care, which I get. She's my mom. We went through the usual questions. How often was I getting migraines? How severe were they? What seemed to trigger them? Then the doctor asked what medications and supplements I was currently taking. My mom jumped in right away. She started listing everything. The doctor nodded along, taking notes. When my mom mentioned the magnesium supplement, the doctor paused. She asked how much magnesium was in that supplement. My mom explained it was 400 milligrams per pill, and that I took one in the morning and one at night. The doctor's eyebrows went up. She said that was quite a bit. She explained she was going to prescribe a new medication for the migraines, and it actually contained magnesium as well. She recommended stopping the separate magnesium supplement when I started the prescription because she didn't want to overload my system. I saw my opportunity. I've been biting my tongue for months, but here was an actual medical professional saying exactly what I've been trying to tell my mom. I asked how much magnesium I should be getting daily in total. The doctor said for someone my age, around 350 milligrams was ideal, that I shouldn't really exceed 400. I turned to my mom with a small smile and told her I'd been right all along. I was teasing, half joking, trying to lighten the mood while also making a point. My mom's face froze. Her jaw clenched. She didn't say anything for the rest of the appointment, just nodded stiffly when the doctor explained the new prescription and handed over the paperwork. The car ride home was silent, completely silent. She wouldn't even look at me. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, her knuckles were white. I tried to break the tension a couple times. I told her I wasn't trying to be mean. Nothing. I said I just wanted her to hear it from someone else. Still nothing. When we got home, she walked straight to her room and closed the door. I heard it lock. She didn't come out for dinner, didn't respond when I knocked to apologize. My older brother came home from work and asked what happened. He wanted to know why our mom was giving me the silent treatment. I explained that I'd told her I was right at the doctor's office. He asked what it was about. I said it was the magnesium thing I've been trying to tell her about for months. He laughed, said I wasn't wrong, but that I knew how she gets. I did know. My mom doesn't like being corrected, especially not by her kids. But this wasn't about her ego. This was about my health, about me knowing my own body and doing my own research. I wasn't being disrespectful. I was trying to take care of myself. She's still barely talking to me today, but honestly, I don't feel that bad about it. The doctor backed me up. I was right, and maybe now she'll actually listen to me instead of a computer program when it comes to my health. I work at the international airport. Most people are just tired and anxious about missing flights or losing luggage. I can work with that. What I can't work with are the ones who think the rules don't apply to them. One day, I clocked in at 6 in the morning, grabbed my coffee from the break room, and headed to my station at the check-in counter. The morning rush was already building up. Families with crying babies, business travelers typing furiously on their phones, elderly couples moving slowly through the queue. Standard stuff. Around 9:30, she walked up to my counter. She had this look on her face already, like she was preparing for a fight before I'd even said hello. Designer luggage, expensive sunglasses pushed up on her head, the whole deal. I put on my customer service smile. I greeted her and asked to see her passport and boarding documents. She dropped her passport on the counter without looking at me already scrolling through her phone. She told me she was in first class and her flight to Paris left at 11:15. I picked up her passport and scanned it into the system. That's when I noticed a flag in our database. Her visa had an issue. The system was showing that her French tourist visa had been flagged for some kind of discrepancy. This happens sometimes. Usually it's just a processing error or something that needs verification from the embassy. I explained to her that there might be an issue with her visa, probably nothing serious, but I needed to call our verification office to sort it out. I told her it should only take a few minutes. She looked up from her phone for the first time and asked what I meant by an issue. She said she'd paid $200 for that visa and there was no issue. I said I understood and she was probably right, but our system was flagging it, so I needed to verify it before I could check her in. I asked her to wait for a moment. She snapped back that she didn't have time to wait. Her flight boarded in less than 2 hours. I acknowledged that and told her we'd do our best to resolve it quickly, but I couldn't let her board without confirming her visa was valid. That's when her face changed. She went from annoyed to furious in about 2 seconds. She asked if I knew who she was. She told me she traveled internationally 6 times a year and had never had a problem before. I said I was sure she hadn't, but this was likely just a system error. I still needed to verify it though. I picked up my phone to call a verification office. She slammed her hand on the counter and told me I wasn't calling anyone. She demanded I check her in right now. I repeated that I couldn't do that and asked her to please step aside so I could handle this quickly. She refused to step aside and told me to do my job properly. Other passengers in line were starting to stare. I kept my voice calm. I told her I was doing my job properly, which was exactly why I needed to verify her documentation. I asked her again to please wait over by the side and I'd call her back once this was resolved. She leaned across the counter, getting right in my face. She told me to listen very carefully. She said she'd paid $1,500 for this ticket, had a hotel booked in Paris, and had dinner reservations. She said I was not going to ruin her vacation because I didn't know how to use my computer. I explained that the computer was working fine, her visa had been flagged, and I needed to verify it. That was the policy. She said she didn't care about my policy. She grabbed my computer monitor. Before I could react, she yanked it toward her, and I heard the crack. She'd pulled it so hard that it smashed against the edge of the counter. The screen went black, spiderweb cracks spreading across the surface. The whole terminal seemed to go quiet. I said she'd just destroyed airport property. She said good, maybe now I'd actually help her instead of making up problems. My supervisor must have seen what happened because he came rushing over with 2 airport security guards. He told her she needed to come with them right now. She refused, saying she wasn't going anywhere until someone checked her in for her flight. The security guard said she'd just committed destruction of property and needed to come with them. She called it ridiculous and said I'd provoked her. She claimed I was being incompetent. The guard told her she could explain that to the police and said they needed to go. She demanded to speak to a manager. My supervisor told her he was the manager and that the officers were going to escort her out now. The guards moved to either side of her. One of them took her arm gently and asked her to walk with them. She ripped her arm away and yelled at them not to touch her. She asked if they knew how much she'd paid for this ticket. The guard gave her an ultimatum. She could either walk with them or they'd have to escort her by force. Her choice. She screamed that she wasn't going anywhere. She crossed her arms and planted her feet. The guards looked at each other, then back at my supervisor. He nodded. What happened next was almost hard to watch. Both guards took her arms. She immediately went limp, like a toddler throwing a tantrum, dropping all her weight. They had to drag her away from the counter. She was screaming the whole time, yelling that this was assault, that she was being assaulted, demanding someone call the police, insisting she was a paying customer. They dragged her across the polished floor, her expensive shoes squeaking along. Other travelers pulled out their phones, recording everything. She kept screaming, kept trying to twist away, but the guards had her secure. They pulled her right past the long security line, past all the gates, everyone watching. The terminal slowly went back to normal. People started moving again, talking in hushed voices. My supervisor brought me a replacement monitor. He asked if I was okay. I said, yeah, just shocked. He told me I'd handled that perfectly and that we had it all on camera. He said the police were going to charge her with destruction of property and disturbing the peace. He mentioned they'd checked her visa with the embassy. It had been revoked last week because she'd overstayed on her last trip to France by 2 months. She would have been detained at Paris Customs anyway. I looked at the shattered monitor sitting on the floor and said she destroyed my screen for nothing. He agreed and told me to take my break. He'd cover my station. I heard later that she spent 8 hours in airport holding before they released her with a court date. The airline refused to refund her ticket, and according to the police report, she's now banned from this airport for 3 years. My replacement monitor works great, by the way. I graduated college with no real plan for what came next. My parents were breathing down my neck about finding something stable, so when I saw an opening for a recruiter position at a temp agency, I applied. The job itself wasn't complicated. I'd match temporary workers with companies looking to fill short-term positions, send out emails to employers, conduct phone screenings, that sort of thing. It should have been straightforward, but my manager made everything 10 times harder than it needed to be. She was one of those people who needed control over every tiny detail. Nothing could leave the office without her stamp of approval. Within my first week, she made it crystal clear that she wanted to proofread every single external email before it went out. Not just the important ones or the ones going to major clients. Every single one. And it didn't stop there. She also demanded to be carbon copied on every outgoing message so she could keep tabs on all our communications. It slowed everything down. I'd draft an email, walk over to her desk, wait for her to read it, while I stood there like a kid waiting for the teacher to grade my homework, then go back to my computer to actually send it. My co-workers and I would complain about it during lunch breaks, but what could we do? We were all young, inexperienced, and frankly just grateful to have jobs. So we put up with it. Things got worse about 2 months into my time there. One of my co-workers had sent an email to an employer, and apparently it went really well. The employer responded with some glowing feedback about how professional and clear the communication was. My co-worker was thrilled. She'd been struggling to get positive responses from companies, so this felt like a real win for her. But then our manager swooped in and hit reply all on that email thread. She thanked the employer for the kind words and made sure to mention that she personally oversaw and proofread all outgoing correspondence to ensure quality. She went on about how she appreciated them taking the time to acknowledge the professionalism of the agency. My co-worker's face went pale when she saw it. The employer had complimented her work and our manager just took full credit for it without a second thought. A few days later, we had our weekly staff meeting. Our manager stood at the front of the room with this smug look on her face and cleared her throat. She reminded everyone that any positive feedback we received from employers should really be attributed to her. She explained that since she proofread and approved every external email, she was essentially the author of all our correspondence. I exchanged looks with my co-workers. Nobody said anything. We just sat there and took it. The thing is, she wasn't even a good writer. I'd noticed plenty of mistakes in her own emails. Weird comma placements, awkward sentence structure, sometimes words that just didn't make sense in context. But she was the manager, so pointing it out felt like career suicide. A few weeks later, I was drafting an email to one of our biggest clients. This company funneled thousands of dollars into our agency every month, and I was trying to pitch a candidate for one of their open positions. I wrote that I believed this candidate would be an excellent fit for their vacant position based on their past experience in similar roles. I walked over to her desk and handed her a printed copy. She read through it slowly, tapping her pen against the paper. She told me it looked good overall, but I needed to change one thing. She pointed to where I had written past experience and said it should be past experience instead. I told her I was pretty sure it was past experience, the kind that means previous experience. She insisted I was wrong and said it should be past, like something that already happened. She claimed she knew the difference between the two words. I opened my mouth to argue but stopped myself. I was exhausted from a long day, and I didn't have the energy to fight about grammar with someone who clearly wasn't going to listen. I told her okay and that I'd change it. I went back to my desk, changed it to past experience, and sent the email with her carbon copied like always. The next morning I had a response waiting in my inbox. My stomach dropped when I saw who it was from. The employer. I opened it, bracing myself. The employer thanked me for the email and said they wanted to provide some feedback. They explained that working in the publishing industry, they dealt extensively with printed literature, so attention to detail in writing was very important to them. They pointed out that I had used past experience in my message, but the correct term was actually past experience. They hoped this feedback would be helpful moving forward. I stared at the screen for a solid 10 seconds. Then I smiled. I hit reply all. My manager was already carbon copied on the original email, so she'd see this response too. I thanked them for taking the time to provide the feedback and said we really valued input from our clients. Then I explained that my manager personally proofread all outgoing external emails before they were sent, and she was the one who had insisted on using past experience in this case. I assured them I would pass the correction along to her and thanked them again. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. About 20 minutes later, I heard her office door slam. She didn't come out for the rest of the day. The next morning, we had another staff meeting. She walked in looking like she barely slept. She told us she had been thinking about our workflow processes and decided to make some changes. She explained that moving forward, she would no longer be proofreading outgoing external emails. She said she trusted us all to handle our own correspondence. She also mentioned she didn't need to be carbon copied on everything anymore, and that we should just use our best judgment. Nobody said a word. We all just nodded. After the meeting, my co-worker leaned over and whispered, asking what happened. I just shrugged and smiled. She never micromanaged our emails again. I'm in computer security. Started out as a junior analyst right after college and worked my way up through various roles until I ended up leading a small team at a mid-sized tech company. But the one thing that drives security people absolutely insane is when employees don't follow basic protocols. And the most basic protocol of all, lock your computer when you walk away from your desk. Doesn't matter if you're going to the bathroom, grabbing coffee, or just turning around to talk to someone for 30 seconds. You lock it. Every single time. This rule exists for good reason. We handle sensitive data, client information, proprietary code, and internal communications that could cause serious damage if accessed by the wrong person. The company made it crystal clear during onboarding, sent regular reminders, and even had posters up in the break rooms. There was absolutely no excuse for leaving your machine unlocked. About 10 years ago, back when I was still individual contributor, my team had this unofficial enforcement method. If someone forgot to lock their computer, we'd hop on their chat client or email and send out something harmless and silly. Nothing mean or inappropriate, just enough to be embarrassing. Someone might send a message asking about the meaning of life or where to buy a good banana costume to the team distribution list. It was lighthearted, everyone would laugh, and the person who forgot would remember to lock their computer next time. We thought of it as a friendly reminder system that kept people from getting formally written up by the security department. Because if security caught you, that meant mandatory retraining, then written warnings, then disciplinary action, and eventually you'd be looking for a new job. The whole team participated in this, and honestly, most of the department did too. It was part of the culture. Everyone understood it was good-natured and meant to help, not hurt. Plus, it actually worked. Our violation rates were pretty low compared to other departments. Then this new guy joined our team. I noticed him on his second day already wandering around the office with his computer completely unlocked and visible from the hallway. I walked over, introduced myself, shook his hand, and had a friendly conversation about how he was settling in. Then I brought up the computer locking policy, explained it was company policy, pointed out that he probably glossed over it during his training sessions, but stressed that it was actually a big deal here. I even sent him the official documentation so he could review it himself. His response wasn't great. He looked at me like I just told him the earth was flat and said this was the dumbest thing he'd ever heard. When I pointed out that we literally worked in security and were the people who created and enforced these policies, he just brushed me off with a dismissive whatever. Then he made this big show of standing up and walking away without locking his computer. Just left it sitting there, email open, chat client running, everything accessible. I stood there for a minute, genuinely surprised. In 15 years, I'd never seen someone be so deliberately dismissive about basic security protocol, especially not someone who worked in the security department. Over the next few weeks, other people on the team tried talking to him. His direct supervisor mentioned it. People from neighboring teams brought it up. Everyone was trying to help him out before he got himself in trouble with the actual security enforcement team. But he was incredibly rude about it every single time, acting like everyone else was being ridiculous and he was the only sane person in the building. Eventually, the team got together and decided he'd had enough friendly warnings. He'd also started getting access to legitimately sensitive information as part of his onboarding progression, which made his behavior even more problematic. So we agreed he was fair game for the harmless prank treatment. A few days later, I was walking down the hallway when I saw him heading toward the elevator atrium. That meant he was either going to the parking garage, the main lobby, or one of the other floors. He'd be gone for at least a few minutes. I walked over to his desk, sat down at his unlocked computer, opened his email client, and typed out a quick silly message to his team distribution list. Something about whether anyone had recommendations for the best pizza toppings. Hit send, stood up, and started walking away. That's when he came back around the corner. Must have forgotten something. He spotted me immediately and walked right over, demanding to know what I was doing at his desk. I just shrugged and told him whatever, then walked away. Later that afternoon, his manager came by my desk. We'd always had a good working relationship, so I wasn't worried, but I could tell something was up. He explained that he'd talked to his new team member about the email situation and went over the whole friendly reminder system we had going on. Then he told me the new guy said he didn't want to play that game and was actually considering reporting me to the security department for impersonating him. I sat back in my chair and thought about that for a second. This guy wanted to report me to security for doing exactly what he'd been warned about for weeks, for trying to help him avoid getting formally written up. I told his manager that was fine, no problem. We wouldn't play the game with him anymore. His manager seemed relieved and thanked me. Then I added that we'd just follow standard procedure instead. I got on the team chat right away and sent a message to about 50 people across multiple teams. The message was simple. Under no circumstances should anyone send harmless reminder messages from the new guy's computer. No more friendly warnings. Just follow the official protocol, which meant filing a formal security violation ticket every single time we observed an unlocked computer. Turns out his desk was in a really high traffic area. It was right near the elevator atrium, the main break room, and the bathrooms. People walked past his desk constantly throughout the day, and he still wasn't locking his computer. The tickets started rolling in. I personally only filed 2 over the next 2 days, but by Monday morning there were almost 50 security violations logged against him in the system. I could see him from my desk, sitting in a meeting room with his manager for his mandatory retraining session. Even from across the office floor I could tell he was angry. He kept gesturing in my direction while talking to his manager, probably blaming me for his situation. His manager came by my desk later that day and asked if I could maybe let up on the tickets since he thought the new guy had learned his lesson. I apologized but explained that I couldn't do that. If I saw a security violation and didn't report it, I was personally liable. I was just following standard procedure. His manager said he understood. The new guy kept his computer locked for the rest of Monday. I thought maybe he'd finally gotten the message. But Tuesday morning I walked past his desk on my way to the coffee station, and there it was. His email client wide open, chat running, everything completely accessible. He wasn't anywhere nearby. I kept walking toward the break room and found him standing by the coffee machine pouring himself a cup. I walked up and let him know his computer was unlocked. He absolutely lost it. started swearing at me, calling me every name in the book, saying I was on some kind of power trip and needed to get a life. Then he practically ran back to his desk. But it was too late. In the few minutes he'd been gone, other people had already walked by and filed tickets. By the end of the day, he had another dozen violations in the system. The security policy had changed at some point without me realizing it. It used to be retraining, then written warnings, then disciplinary action. Now it went straight from retraining to disciplinary action. And this guy had already been through retraining. So now he had to attend a formal meeting with his direct manager, the department director, and several people from the security enforcement team. I found out later that they'd put him on a performance improvement plan specifically related to security compliance. Those plans are basically a countdown to termination. You either fix the problem immediately and completely, or you're gone. He was gone within a week. I ran into his former manager a few months later, and we talked about what happened. He told me the new guy had blamed everyone but himself, insisted the policy was stupid, and argued that he shouldn't have to follow rules he disagreed with. Working in security while openly refusing to follow security policies because you think they're dumb. The irony was apparently lost on him. Nobody on the team wanted to ruin anyone's career. We'd been trying to protect him from the formal system by using our informal, friendly reminder method. But when you deliberately and repeatedly violate basic security protocol, especially after being warned over and over again, you're making a choice. And in this line of work, those choices have results. His replacement started 2 weeks later and locked her computer religiously from day one. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.